As fun as last night was, Hieronymus quickly informed me that it was not my punishment and that I could be looking forward to spending, quote, months of misery, as he put it, within the next week. I had no idea if he was going to give me an independent study of his own, but I didn't question it. Now that I knew he could be watching me at any given time, I knew I was going to have to really focus on my white magic so I was more aware of when he did it. In fact, I spent so long in the library looking over different textbooks on magical detection that I didn't realize that it had already faded into late afternoon. I hadn't seen Hieronymus since I left that morning, and I hadn't run into William all day. Not wanting to be late, I quickly packed up my things and headed back across the quad as fast as my feet would carry me. "Hey, Tori!" Virginia waves at me from across the quad, with Donald and Ellen trailing along behind her at a much more leisurely pace. "Come grab dinner with us." "Can't," I say as I shake my head. "I'm having dinner tonight with Hieronymus and William at the Glen." Virginia tilts her head to the side. "What? But they already left like a while ago." "What?" I ask flatly. "They really left without me?" "Yeah," Donald adds as he and Ellen catch up. "With Jason." "What?" I exclaim dramatically as Virginia rolls her eyes. "But I was supposed to go with them. Why is Jason going with them? They hate each other." "No idea." Virginia shrugs. "William and Jason did hit it off pretty well, though, so I'm surprised he dragged Grabby along." "This must be a part of my punishment," I mutter, more to myself than to them. Punishment?" Virginia asks as she raises an eyebrow. "He's your husband now, and yet he's still punishing you?" I wrestle with myself for a moment. "It's different," I finally decide. "This wasn't for anything I really did wrong, exactly, although he is punishing me for not telling him about Jason and our independent study. Turns out he already knew, but he wasn't happy that I just never mentioned it." "He knew?" Ellen asks as she tilts her head to the side in confusion. "How did he know?" "Apparently he has eyes and ears everywhere," I say as I glance around us. The sky was starting to get dark, and the wind picking up did nothing to dispel my sudden sense of unease. He could be listening in on this conversation right now. Well, if that's the case, Virginia literally grabs me by the shoulders and steers me towards the cafeteria. Then he's just going to have to deal with me slurping obnoxiously on a milkshake for the next few hours. That actually does sound really good, I agree. With like a super hot fudgy brownie ice cream sundae like we used to get back at the food court. "Yes," Virginia cheers. "This weekend. I don't care what Grabby says. It's a date." We take a short break from our conversation as we grab some food from the cafeteria and settle down. "So I really do hope that I can go to the mall this weekend," I continue, "because Grabby said that there's months of misery ahead of me." "What do you think he meant by that?" Ellen asks. "Maybe he's assigning you to months of detention with me?" Donald asks. "I think I have Saturday detention scheduled through the end of July at least." "I have no idea." I shrug. "Although I can't believe that they dropped me from going to the Glen like that. It was my idea. And then they just ditched me." "Is that why you're sitting at the kiddie table?" Virginia teases. "Trust me, you're better off. William's been acting stuffy all day, trying to figure out his greater purpose and everything." "I don't know," Ellen says with a sigh. "It must be difficult to have graduated and still be unsure of what you want to do with your life." I consider this a moment. "Do you know what you want to do when you graduate, Ellen?" "I want to work in the other world," Ellen says immediately. "I want to open a research lab and study the scientific principles that I've learned in this world and see if they apply to that one. It might be the key to helping us discover why magic in the other world is more potent than magic in this one, and how to open the gap a little wider, so to speak, to allow witches and wizards here to become more naturally in tune with their magic." We all stare at her for a moment, and she blushes. "I don't know. It was just a thought I had." "It's a great thought," Donald says approvingly. "You're the only person I know smart enough to do something like that." "What do you want to do?" I ask as I turn to Virginia. Something that involves food and sports club," Virginia says thoughtfully. "Maybe I'll become an American soccer player. Then I can play sports all the time and eat a whole bunch." You would be great at that last part, Donald teases. Maybe you should just become a professional eater, like you see at carnivals and stuff. I don't think I'd make much money doing that, Virginia admits. What about you, Donald? Nuh-uh, Donald says as he crosses his arms over his chest and shakes his head. I'm not telling. He wants to open his own greenhouse, Ellen says brightly, and Donald blushes a bright red. He really likes gardening and working with his hands and all that stuff. But that's cool, though, I say before Virginia can tease him about it. Yeah, Virginia says as she turns back to me. What about you, Tori? What do you want to do when you get out of here? I'm not sure, I say as I squirm awkwardly. Remember when I had that dinner with Hieronymus' father a few weeks ago? He really wants him to go back to England and be a viscount, and he wants me to be a viscountess and give Hieronymus tons of little children to keep that family tree growing. They all frown and shift uncomfortably. But that isn't what you want to do, is it? Ellen asks after a moment. Yeah, Virginia adds. Don't freak out on me, but let's just pretend Grabby isn't around. If you had to make your own way in the world, what would you do? Well, I hesitate for a moment as I think it over. I might take a page out of Ellen's book, actually. I think I'd want to work in the Department of Magical Memory. Really? You'd do that? Ellen asks. You'd really be okay taking people's memories away from them? I shake my head. No, the opposite, actually. I want to study people. I know Hieronymus mentioned that there aren't a lot of studies done on people who have their memories erased versus people who have their memories shielded. I want to study them. I want to combine magic and science and see if memory loss can actually affect a person's identity over the long term. I don't know anything about how I'd study it, but I just know that I want to. And do memory charms work differently for people and creatures in the other world? Ellen asks. Does it affect M differently there than it would here? See, I don't know, I continue, and I don't think anyone really does. That's why I want to study it more. But you're not supposed to, Virginia says quietly as she shifts around. You both are talking about mixing science and magic. Everything we've ever been told since we were kids has told us that we shouldn't be doing that. They don't mix well. Someone tried once, and the world almost ended. Literally, Donald adds. We study the Aquarian lab experiments officially next year, but all magical-born kids have been spoon-fed that cautionary tale since we could talk. Well, we'll just be careful then, I say as I turn to Ellen, who gulps and nods. I turn back to them and try to take the conversation back to a cheery note. Besides, you don't think Hieronymus would actually let me study anything that would let me blow up the whole world, do you? What's this about blowing up the world? William asks. We all look up at him and he grins. Sorry, I just got back. What's this about the world ending? Tori is going to blow up the world because you and Grabby ditched her, Virginia teases, and I roll my eyes at her. Oh, you wanted to come? William asks as he shifts his gaze back towards me. Sorry, I know you mentioned you'd come last night, but then after Grabiner showed up without you, I thought you might have changed your mind. No, things are good, I tell him quickly. I don't want to talk about Damien and Grabiner's blow up in front of everyone else, and it seems William doesn't either. So, what did you guys talk about? Donald asks. Are you coming back to teach here after all? I'm still trying to decide, William admits. We all learned the pentachromatic approach to magic here, but there are other schools all over the world. I could learn about the hoodoo approach and study that for a bit. I guess I just don't want to commit myself to one thing when there could be more doors open to me down the line with more experience in education. Well, you have time to figure it out, Virginia says. We're not going anywhere anytime soon, are we, guys? Definitely not, Donald agrees with a wide smile. We all sit and talk for a bit before I finally decide to head back for the night. William was going to be headed off soon, and as much as I wanted to see Hieronymus, I wasn't exactly looking forward to discussing my punishment, or why he had suddenly decided that I couldn't come to the Glen. Was that also part of my punishment? Still, there was another reason I hesitated on returning back to our room. True, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the rest of my life after Iris, but it only felt fitting that it had something to do with memory magic and how to protect others from it. Considering my own life could have ended or been irreparably altered because of the lack of information that existed about it in the magical world, it only made sense that I'd want to right that wrong. But would Hieronymous support me through it? I would have thought that he'd support me through anything, but like Virginia had said, science and magic didn't exactly mix. As I enter the room, I can see that Hieronymous is already asleep in bed. That made sense, especially considering that it was around midnight. I tiptoe around the room quietly before I hop in the shower. I wasn't quite sure I wanted to tell him about my thoughts, but then again, did I have to? This wasn't keeping a secret like it was when I was afraid to tell him that I was studying with Jason. This concerned my future, and the one I wasn't sure exactly what to do with. The more I learned this year, the more it would help me make up my mind, but was it wrong to keep those thoughts from my husband? No, I finally decided it wasn't. Not really. These were my private inside thoughts, the ones I usually recorded in my diary. The truth was, I wasn't sure what to do with my life yet, and it was okay for me to be unsure. The last thing I wanted was to run all of my thoughts by Hieronymous and get his opinion on each of them. If he was as against me learning memory magic as he was about me venturing into the other world, then I'd never be able to learn what I wanted or experience life on my own terms. Hieronymous was already an adult. He had already made his choices. He already knew what he wanted out of life, at least to some extent. He wanted to stop young adults from making foolish choices that could hurt others the way he had as a child. It was admirable, but even so, I was starting to get the feeling that he didn't want to stay at Iris Academy forever. He could leave right now if he wanted to. He could go anywhere and do anything. But he didn't want to go. He wanted to stay with me, and I wanted to stay with him. He had at least experienced more of the world than I had, and had a general idea of what he wanted to do with his life. But what did I want to do with mine? That I wasn't quite sure yet. The only thing I knew was that I wanted Hieronymous in my life, and he wanted me in his. Beyond all that, once I figured out what I wanted for myself, and he figured out what kind of life he wanted for himself, then we could decide what path we wanted to take. Together.